The MCU just revealed their next big bad, and oh boy, is it a big one. I've got my thoughts right now. Hello everybody, I'm Dan Murrell here with some breaking news out of San Diego Comic-Con. And that was an event that I used to go to every single year, and I loved the experience of going, but I've got to be honest, not doing it the last several years, it does make for a much more low-stress weekend, not chasing the running news and doing all of the stuff. It was always great to go out and meet people, but I've enjoyed just kind of watching from home and seeing the news roll in, and that's what I was doing. I was on my couch, I had my computer in front of me, I was watching the Hall H news come in from the Marvel panels, watching the Olympics, and the stuff that was coming in looked pretty good. You had stuff from Brave New World and Thunderbolts. You had the director from Fantastic Four come out. They revealed the name of the movie. It's the Fantastic Four First Steps, and that's great and all, but I was like, okay, you know what? I'll wait for it to wrap up, and then I'll probably just go back and play some NCAA College Football 25. And then the big bombshell dropped, and it was kind of multi-layered. Number one, it was confirmed, as had been reported in a lot of the trades, that the Russo brothers will be returning to direct the next two Avengers film. That in and of itself would be huge news because they took the MCU to new heights and everybody thought that they were done. Then we get the reveal that Doctor Doom is going to be the big bad going forward, which again is pretty predictable. Everybody knew with the Fantastic Four coming into play and with Secret Wars coming up that Doctor Doom was probably on the horizon. And yet, as they always are able to do at Comic-Con, they saved the biggest surprise for last with the live unveiling on stage that Doctor Doom in the MCU will be played by none other than Mr. Robert Downey Jr., formerly the biggest hero in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, will now become arguably the biggest villain so far in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. We will see Doctor Doom in 2026 in the first new Avengers movie, which has now been renamed Avengers Doomsday, and then Avengers Secret Wars will be hitting theaters in 2027. And this unlocks so many questions and possibilities that I just wanted to kind of talk about for a few minutes here. First of all, Robert Downey Jr. is back in the MCU. And honestly, if they were going to bring him back, I think that this was the way to do it. Every time there were rumors that he was going to come back as Iron Man, I didn't want him to. As much as I loved his performance, he had such a great ending. That character went out so perfectly. I didn't want them to cheapen that by bringing Iron Man back. And I suspect that's why the Russo brothers never really signed on for that as well. But the idea with the whole multiverse and everything going on now, that you can bring back what I presume to be Tony Stark as Doctor Doom is really intriguing. I'm sure there are some Fantastic Four purists that will say, well, no, it's Victor Von Doom. You've got to stay close to the comic book origins. But there are so many different comic book origins at this point that I think the possibilities here are more exciting than maybe some of the trepidation about changing the fundamentals of who Doctor Doom is. First of all, if you're going to be bringing in all of the different MCU characters, and again, there have been rumors that perhaps they're going to try to bring Tom Holland in as Spider-Man, which of course they need to be doing because it's probably their most profitable character. The idea of putting the Tom Holland Spider-Man in some sort of a conflict with a variant of Tony Stark that is now Doctor Doom, now becoming the biggest villain and somebody that he has to defeat just on a character level between those two. That's really, really interesting. And Tom Holland, I think, is a really good actor, both as Spider-Man and not as Spider-Man. And I think that that could be a great challenge for this character. The idea of the person who was maybe the biggest influence on his journey as a superhero now becoming the villain that he has to defeat, and all of the psychological baggage that comes with it on top of the psychological baggage that Spider-Man is already dealing with. And so automatically my interest level goes up because I want to see what they potentially do with those characters. The Russos, obviously, I trust because I think that they made some of the best MCU movies so far. I mean, their batting average is pretty stellar. And then just the idea of going into this corner of the universe that we don't really know about, because the other thing with Avengers Doomsday now being announced is that Avengers the Kang Dynasty, which was the movie that was announced, is gone. And again, that's not really a surprise. I think the question that most people are going to wonder about is whether they would have done this without all of the off-screen stuff that happened with Jonathan Majors, because the reaction to Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania was already enough for a lot of people, including myself, to question whether Kang was really strong enough to be the big supervillain that was going to hold up the next Avengers movies, or at least the Kang Dynasty. But now we have replaced him, I suppose, with Doctor Doom. Now, on a villain level, there is no question that he's big enough to be the big bad. And again, it makes sense if you're going to do Secret Wars, especially if you're going off of the sort of newer iteration, which I'm now just kind of starting to get into, and I'm going to get into even more, knowing that Doctor Doom will definitely be in play. It makes sense that it is Doctor Doom. And honestly, Marvel needed to do some course correction, because right here on this channel, I've been talking about for a very long time that Marvel has lost a lot of its heat, and it seemed like they were sort of adrift in the MCU for the last several years. Part of that was the pandemic. Part of that was the shift towards Disney Plus and trying to figure out what their storytelling was going to be like. But this looks like them trying to course correct back to one major road, building up to one major confrontation, building up a stable of characters that will lead into that final fight. It's not as clean as it was before. And listen, the possibility exists that you could do all of these things. You could bring back the Russos, you could bring back Robert Downey Jr., and it still comes off as a pale imitation of what came before. But if you are looking to Marvel and saying, hey, you need to try to capture that magic again, this is a pretty good way to at least get people excited about it, to get people looking forward to it. I don't know a lot of people that were looking forward to Avengers Kang Dynasty because it just wasn't a character that a whole lot of people connected to very strongly. Here, we have a character in Doctor Doom that even the most basic comic book fans, and I don't mean basic in a derogatory way, I mean people that have base level knowledge of comic books, they know who Doctor Doom is, and they know who Robert Downey Jr. is. They know that he was Iron Man, and those questions are going to start being asked automatically. Wait, Robert Downey Jr. is Doctor Doom? How's that going to work? Is he playing Tony Stark? Is it a version of Tony Stark? I have to go see this movie to figure out. It's a pretty savvy move from a casting standpoint to juice audience interest in these new movies. Now, of course, comes the important part, which is the creative part. How do you write this story? The Russos said that they were brought back to the MCU because they were given the opportunity to tell what they thought was a very unique and different story. Now, that's what any director is going to say because they want to get people excited. But if they were able to sort of crack this formula and figure out how to do this in a way that's meaningful to the characters and that delivers a great story, then we could really see the MCU getting largely back on track, or at least back to the point where their Avengers films are able to consistently deliver billion-plus-dollar worldwide grosses. The last Avengers movie was Avengers Endgame, and a lot of people were saying, okay, well, what's the buildup to these new Avengers films? What's going to be the hook? Well, Marvel now has that hook. They have that hook in Doctor Doom. They have that hook in Robert Downey Jr. And I think where the only real minefield lies between here and there is they've got to nail a lot of this stuff that comes in between Fantastic Four, Captain America, I think, and some of the other films, because you don't want to kind of come limping into Avengers Doomsday. You want people to be excited. Now, we have seen from this weekend's box office results, I'm going to spend all day tomorrow crunching the numbers on Deadpool and Wolverine. There is still a lot of excitement out there for the MCU. If you get the right project, people will still show up, and they'll show up in the same numbers that we saw when the MCU was at its peak. So this is really kind of a dividing point. And I think, years from now, I'll probably come back and look at this video and figure out which way it actually went. But now, sort of looking into the cloudy future, I think the MCU is kind of branching into one of two roads. This is either the point where the MCU goes off into a road of recapturing some of that magic, recapturing the zeitgeist, getting people excited the way that they were 5 or 10 years ago about Marvel movies, or this could be seen as a desperation play, as the fact that the MCU really didn't know what to do, and so they just tried to go back to the old directors and go back to the old star, back up the Brinks truck to Robert Downey Jr.'s house. I can't even imagine how much money they're paying him to come back, and they still weren't able to pull it off. I'm not going to count out that possibility. I'm not going to say this is going to be the most amazing thing ever, but what I will say is they have set the stage for what could be something really special. If they can pull it off, if they can make this consequential to the characters, consequential to the MCU, really kind of draw a new side of Tony Stark's character that we haven't seen, or that darker side that we did see in some of the Iron Man movies, and make that kind of its own character inside the MCU, and then have him bounce off characters that he knows, like Spider-Man, this could be the change, the shakeup that the MCU needs. And so, color me excited. This was not something I would have guessed in a million years. Doctor Doom, sure, but Robert Downey Jr. as Doctor Doom, I never would have predicted that. And Kevin Feige, I've been in a couple Hall H panels before. They just have this way of capping off a Marvel panel after already showing footage and stuff that gets people excited. They just have a way of leaving you with that one last thing that really gets people talking. A few years ago, it was Blade. They've done it so many times in the past. This was massive, and it literally got me up off the couch and into the studio to make this video. So what do you think of Robert Downey Jr. as the MCU's Doctor Doom? Let me know down in the comments below. This is going to be very fun to track. It's going to be one of those stories that I can track here on the channel from the very beginning. We won't probably find out until 2026 just how it all pans out, but I think a really intriguing development from Marvel. Thanks so much for watching this breaking news video. Be sure to stay tuned right here for more movie news, reviews, box office, and more. As I mentioned, I'll be covering Deadpool and Wolverine's record-shattering opening weekend. Marvel's having a pretty good weekend, by the way, and so much more right here on the channel. Until next time, stay safe, and I'll see you then. Bye.